There's so much time, energy, and budgets that are spent on personalization and trying to present the right thing to the user within the television application, when in reality, they might have already discovered something to watch before they even switch on their TV.
Welcome back to another session for Streaming Made Easy Live on September 10th in Amsterdam, the day before IBC starts. I'm bringing amazing people on stage and in the audience. But ahead of that event, I wanted to bring two folks that I really like and who've been working on amazing content for us. So let me bring Conrad from Craft and Matt from FX Digital. Hey, guys.
Hey, Marion.
So this is the second time that you've been working together. When we were at SME Live 2025, you guys were on stage. Well, Matt and I were on stage, and you presented a research piece that you had led with Kraft and Conrad's team. I want to double click on a few elements, but of course, we're going to be back on stage, not with you, Matt. It's going to be Tom and I. We're going to be on stage in Amsterdam in September, and we're going to present even more data. There's even going to be a game around it with things to win. If I can get you guys started. So you actually surveyed over 1,000 people in the UK. And the one thing that I saw and that really grabbed my attention from the get-go, 65% of Gen Z decide what to watch on social before the TV is even on, and 77% say that TV is, one of the most important thing in their household. For you, Matt, what those two data points, on paper feels very contradictory. How do you build, to that end?
A great question. Yeah. So just to introduce that research. So like you said, we the year before it surveyed 800 people, and this year expanded that reach to 1,200 people and included older audiences at the request of the audience at your event last year. But the amazing thing was that expansion actually allowed us to start seeing trends between those different kind of age demographics. And one of the things you point out there, the kind of 65% of Gen Z are getting their recommendations from the feed, is something that we discovered. What was fascinating is the trend. So obviously, if you then look at older generations, so we group some into baby boomers, only 6% of those are getting their recommendations from the feed. So there's definitely this trend over time of the younger the audience member is, the more likely they are to be using social for discoverability. And for us as a team that help our customers to reach audiences in the living room, what that is, the reason that's quite fascinating is because there's so much time, energy, and budgets that are spent on personalization and trying to present the right thing to the user within the television application, when in reality, they might have already discovered something to watch before they even switch on their TV. So yeah, it kind of makes you think that content discoverability has to be not just something that has this on-platform discovery, but definitely this off-platform discovery. And this year, I think we've seen a response from the likes of Disney and the other big streamers. They've recognized this because they've started releasing lots of short applications for mobile, right? So they're trying to capture that audience there.
Yeah, I think that says many things about our, as an industry, our inability to actually, facilitate discovery on platform, that we feel the need to do that somewhere else. Conrad, I think, so again, we spoke about the fact that you guys expanded the scope from a demo perspective, and I actually saw that you even sat in people's home. What did you look for that perhaps the survey on its own, didn't give you?
Yeah, well, Marion, I spent 25 years sitting in people's homes, much like a burglar, and to observe them, because many of the things that we do in life in general, but specifically in a fragmented media landscape, are subconscious. The choices we make are subconscious. We're not aware that we're even making them. And so spending extended amounts of time with people, watching them in their natural environment, and we do this by placing cameras in people's homes and getting them to film themselves, so we're not even there, so we're not biasing stuff. But here we were with them, and so you get to watch how they choose, you get to watch what they do, but also you understand the context of their environment. who else is in the room? What's the room like? You know, it's very different. Someone living in a studio flat with their husband, small studio flat in London, to living in a 3-4 bedroom family household. You know, and all of those contextual factors make a big difference in how people choose. So there's real value in combining those approaches.
Yeah, there's what people say and what people do. So I love, having the ability to check in on both. Matt, so FX Digital commissioned this report, and for context, those who may not know you guys, you are a CTV app development agency. You really focus on big screen experience. What was the one question, if I can have you choose one, that you wanted answered here?
That's a great question. I think last year what sparked the survey was this desire to understand why people were putting subtitles on when they were watching TV. And it seemed to be something that was trending in younger audiences. But I think this year, the main overarching thing we wanted to discover from this year was the differences between those generations, because there are some fascinating trends that are happening. And one of the most exciting things for me is that what we're seeing is that younger audiences have a much larger appetite for interactivity on the big screen, which is probably driven by them using tools like Twitch and YouTube and those kinds of platforms that are much more interactive than what traditional television is. I'm a big believer that the television can do much more for people in their homes than just provide streaming video content. And the results from this survey are kind of backing up that relationship someone has with their television in their home is evolving and changing over time as it becomes more capable.
Conrad, we said at the top, right, that discovery left the room in a way. Everything is happening mostly off platform. So 65% of boomers still start at the TV menu. The 6% of them use social to decide. Not surprised by those results. Gen Z is 65. So you had that question last year. Is this number changing in any shape or form?
No, not really, is the answer. So it's pretty stable year on year, which we'd expect. I mean, we wouldn't expect it to change massively. Very few things change hugely year on year. And generally, especially in today's sort of information landscape, we're always looking for the next big thing and change and the new explosive stat. But actually, the fact that these things haven't changed gives us great faith as researchers, because it shows that it's probably true. Rather, if we'd seen it jump 20%, we'd think, God, what's happening?
Here to stay, yeah.
I remember when we started the research, Conrad, that was actually one of the things we discussed. One of the most amazing things I learned from this survey was that 24% of baby boomers still use a paper TV guide. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. I've not seen a paper TV guide for a long, long time, but they're still very popular.
What did you see exactly? What does that mean, discovering content off platform?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this kind of work for, like I said, for a very long time. And so it's quite interesting to see the changes over time. And what it means effectively is that for people who have already made a decision before they turn on the TV, the journeys are very what we call short and straight. We did a project a long time ago called the Long and Winding Road to Content, right? And so because a lot of discovery is happening off platform, by the time you're on platform, people are psychologically in a very closed-minded state, and they are in what we call a seek mentality, not a browse mentality. So even though all the information might be there and the personalization is lovely and FX Digital have built the perfect CTV app, people's psychology is they have the blinkers on. So I want to get to Yellowstone. I want to get to the football. And the other stuff around there is at best being taken in subliminally, but it may well not be being taken in at all.
Yeah, but Matt, so that means that essentially the decision, let's say it's being made on TikTok, we pick up the remote. What is the app for? It feels like it's not moot, huh? But
yeah.
Thank God. But
Exactly,
what does it do? What can it do? Number one, to actually deliver on that promise. People know and be taken straight to content is number one. Number two is once that session, which was decided ahead, is done, is there anything that can be done to keep people engaged?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there with regards to once the session and they've kind of watched what they want to watch is done, how do you keep them engaged afterwards? And I think that's where the personalization and the app design comes in. But even before that, what this research tells me is that the kind of way we build and design TV applications at the moment does have to evolve and change. And yes, this is the younger audiences that are driving these kind of off-platform discovery, but if we don't adapt and change the UX to those younger audiences, eventually it's going to go a little bit stale. A good example of this is YouTube get this entirely right. They completely understand this, and on their application, search is on every page, right? Search is on every single page across that YouTube application, but it's not on every page of the Netflix app or the other applications, right? And I think if you're coming into a TV application and you know what you want to watch, you're probably going to search it, right? So you're probably going to want to use that mechanism more than any other mechanism on the application. So I wouldn't be surprised if applications like Netflix and the like start to make much more of a feature of the search facility on an application. And then beyond that, it's all about how can you present to them content that maybe content that's personalized to them, yes, but I also think there's something quite strong in having editorially curated content. Some platforms do this a lot better than others. Some platforms, I go onto them and it's almost over personalized. Personally, I'm driven to friends for recommendations. I probably fall quite nicely into that millennial category, and that's what the stats are showing us, is that millennials typically get recommendations from referral more so than social. So I'll probably fall into that camp. But yeah, that's probably what I'd expect to see in terms of app design evolution over the next few years, is that the search and obviously AI with that becomes a much more front and center thing.
Yeah. Building on Matt's point as well, the platform does have a role in marketing. It's just a longer term role. It's just almost the way that we advise our clients. We do a lot of work in sort of content development and content discovery as well with some of the biggest streamers. So that just because someone's not going to choose you this time, the fact that they might see you gets you into their consideration set and on their to-do list in future. And so that's a kind of reinforces Matt's point. You don't necessarily want to make it as easy as the user wants. And this is a sort of goes totally against the principle of user design. But if you think about supermarkets, they don't put the eggs and the bread at the front of the store on purpose, because people just come in and get the eggs and the bread and they leave and they don't buy anything else. So you kind of want to put some of your best product in front of them, in front of the user, before they get to exactly what they want, or at least so they notice it while they get into what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, a few weeks ago, Samsung released their, I don't know if it's annual or, for H1 across Europe, how many times a day viewers are coming onto the Samsung home screen. It is 5 times. And, how much time they spent. And the way it was presented in report was, thumbs up, it's awesome. Which I understand from a business perspective, because essentially they want people to spend time on that UI. Right now, it is pushing only endemic advertisers, meaning content service providers, the Netflix and Disney's of the world. But there's a point in time where, and we're starting to see this with LG and iSense Vita, etc., you will be seeing non-endemic advertisers. So they want you to dwell on and spend time on that platform, on that home screen. And actually, that's where I agree with you. It is going against, what is the best for the viewer, for the end user, and in this particular case.
Well, the best in the short term. Sorry, just the best in the short term. In that, if you think the goal is to get to my content as quickly as possible, but if you don't build in too much friction, you're solving Matt's other problem, which is, I might want to have an idea of what else there is to watch.
Yeah.
So there's a balance to be struck, I think.
Yeah, 100%. No, I mean, it's interesting what you mentioned on that consideration, because it is true that they're pushing hard and they're being more and more innovative when it comes to pushing upcoming titles, etc., from content providers on platforms. So perhaps it's not working that one time around because people knew already, but it's, that repetition will be valuable ultimately. Guys, you had an event a few weeks back, and I think you went into breakout rooms and you pushed that questions to people, right? When feeds and algorithm dictate discovery. So how does, CTV apps and platform must adapt? What did people say? Anything that you can share?
Yeah, one of the most interesting things that come out of that day was that I guess when we started this research, we made the assumption that people would just have one television in their living room. And there's actually a few people in the room that were like, no, we have two. Because we talk a lot about this need for compromise and how
Yep.
if you're a group in front of a television watching a program, say, for example, if I'm with my partner, there's some natural compromise between the two of you on what to watch. But there were a few people that were like, actually, we just refused to compromise. So my partner has her TV and I have my TV, and I sit there and game whilst she's watching television. And I think this kind of goes back to your point, Conrad, which is until you actually start sitting in these rooms with people or actually speaking to them face to face, like you just don't get that kind of interesting insight from survey data. So yeah, that was super fascinating finding.
So, talking about compromising, you say that 60% of people who watch with someone else say that they compromise, millennial 70%. Can you unpack that for us, Conrad? What does that tell you?
Well, look, TV has, again, it goes back to some of these things being very constant, right? TV's usually been a social activity, and it's only been in the past 50 to 20 years, like with the advent of tablets and second screening, that we've really been able to, if we want to sit in the same room as each other, assuming we live in a multi-person household, that we've actually been able to watch separately at all. And so there's a kind of deep human need to be together. It's no surprise that actually people do compromise, and I think probably everyone who's got a partner or children or children will recognise this. That most of the time when you're sitting on the television in front of the television with somebody else, you're probably not watching your number one choice, or at least you have a set of programs that you can agree on that you both like, but then you also have sets of programs that you don't agree on. So with me and my wife, I like Star Wars. She can't stand sci-fi. So if I get a minute to myself, I'm watching Andor in 20-minute segments. I think you asked. We were talking before about this is a life stage effect and not a generational effect. In 15 to 20 years' time, I can guarantee you, if we're still doing this, I will come back on this podcast with a new data point that says Gen Z are the generation who are compromising the most on what they want to watch, because they'll have just moved into that life stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the live stage approach, because we've been hearing these last few years, particularly when we look at the fact that TV viewership is decreasing, that there's massive fragmentation depending on the age you have, and you have a lot of analysts within the industry that keep saying those habits they have now are never going to change. So I love the fact that you're saying, well, actually, times change, context change, and perhaps TV won't be the number one, the go-to, also because there's many more options than before. But there's hope in thinking that some of the traditional players will still manage to find their way into those age demos that you've mentioned.
Yeah, precisely. And both of those things can be true at the same time. Like fragmentation does mean that TV is taking a smaller amount of the total attention or time pie that any one person has. That's true. A trend downwards doesn't mean a trend to zero. And actually, we think we do a lot of work with the PSBs here in the UK, and they're remarkably resilient. For various reasons, and also they're evolving too. TV evolves, and I think in the presentation that we gave to you, Matt, didn't we? We sort of had this timeline of television. So we used this word television, and if you look at what TV was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, noughties, etc., it's very different, and TV will be a different thing in 10 to 15 years' time, but it will still ostensibly be TV, and it will have learnt from the digital world as it is already doing, and that's just part of its natural evolution.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Is the trend, a trend downwards doesn't mean a trend to zero. Like we have this habit of catastrophizing the cord cutting, right? When in reality, I wouldn't be surprised if what happens is over time it just ends up plateauing, right? Because people are changing their habits quite quickly, but we'll eventually get to a point where there is this subset of people that are still very much engaged with the way television has been consumed for them for the last however many years. So I think it's going to take a lot longer for us to see things like switch off of old signals than we initially thought. but that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because there's still an audience that are engaged there, that are worth spending time on.
Yeah, just to build on that as well. I mean, this has happened for every media type. So when radio was the dominant media type, when cinema was the dominant media type, these things are supposed to be dead almost a century ago.
Yeah, and if you try to book an Odyssey ticket, you can't get one right now.
So Matt, one thing that is interesting with this concept of compromising is that within the TV, the homepage, I haven't seen that many platforms. I'm talking Samsung, LG, and others really dipping their toes and having profiles. Now, once you are within an app, may that be Netflix or others, you have profiles. So the question is, isn't there like a bit of a mismatch, right? Considering that people are actually co-viewing, and I had data earlier this year with RTL at Alliance, like the proportion of people watching content together was enormous. So isn't there a mismatch between how people view and how those platforms are built?
I believe so, yeah. So this is probably the second thing that we found from the data so far. The first being that I think the future is that it's going to be the UI is going to be a lot more search driven. The second thing is definitely the TV applications that are being built today have profiles, and personalization is done around one individual. When in reality you have multiple individuals sitting in front of the television at any one time. I think that the utopia in UX design here would be that the television knows who's in the room and can grab two profiles that exist on the television, pair them, and present to them, either a shared watch list or things that are personalized based on both of their likes. Failing that, actually, one of the things that Tom, our chief of product, my co-founder, one of the things that he's been talking quite a lot about recently is the idea of having like a facility on a TV application where you as an individual can recommend a piece of content for your friend to watch, right? Like that would be so cool if I open my TV application for Netflix and, it come up saying, oh, Tom's recommended you watch this. Like, that is going to make me definitely want to watch that piece of content, because it's a really warm kind of referral. And then second to that completely, the operating systems are probably a bit behind here on the profile stuff. I actually think that the operating systems are probably where we're going to see a lot more innovation than maybe the applications, because there's just so much competition now. It's not just Samsung and LG. You've got lots of the smaller players in Europe, but then others across the world and including Asia. So I think what that competition is going to cause is lots of innovation, because they're all going to be trying to differentiate from one another. And I suspect one will start introducing things like shared profiles, and then the others will try and follow suit, because really the innovation in the operating system and the software is probably where they're going to differentiate now, because it's probably not hardware at the moment.
Yeah, well, during SME Live in September, you guys should go chat with the team at TF1. They're going to be on stage along with Netflix. But aside from that Netflix partnership on TF1 Plus, they launched now maybe a couple of years ago when they relaunched the platform. They have that functionality actually. So you have standalone profiles, and there's that home profile. I'm not sure how it works, how it is able to take recommendation from whatever's been happening in each of the profiles, but have a chat with them, how they built it, and what are the results, because there's one thing, and there's what we build and what people actually use, and sometimes there's a mismatch there as well. Then you guys went on looking at other trends in how people behave, and the one thing that to me has been very elusive, we hear about it, but we're not really sure whether there's gravitas and people will actually be game with it, is 55% of Gen Z like the idea of scanning a QR code to buy from an ad. 80% of boomers, on the other hand, find storing card details on a TV unappealing. Where are we going with this e-commerce shoppable TV? It feels like we're going nowhere.
So that's one of the interesting things that come out from the trend subject that I mentioned earlier. So in expanding the survey out to include older generations and younger generations, what it's allowed us to do is to see how those perspectives are shifting over time, essentially, right? Because we're moving through the generations here. And to your point, I think we had 6% of boomers said that they would be interested in storing their card details on television, right? But that was compared to 40% of Gen Z that said they would find that idea appealing. So yeah, 40% is obviously still somewhat low, below 50%. But the interesting thing here is the difference, the trend. And I think someone actually at the event that we had a couple of weeks back, obviously I was maybe a bit young when the internet come out. I probably didn't even have my own credit card at the time, right? Yeah. But they mentioned the similarity to the internet, and they said when the internet first started to gain traction, there was a massive like perspective on towards it that like we would just never put our credit card details in there. It's just not safe, like it's not trusted. And obviously nowadays that's the primary format for where we keep our credit card details. And I think the television's probably going through that similar thing where people perceive it as what it was, this CRT or old stream, and over time as their relationship with it changes, their appetite for doing certain things with it will change as well.
Yeah, that was actually me.
Oh, right, there you go. Yeah, you were the old timer, comrade.
Yeah, I was the old timer, but it's true, like obviously I don't look it, but I've been doing this a long time, and people swore blind they would never put their credit card details into the internet, but these things become normalized, people become habituated into it, and then you end up with someone like Jeff Bezos he's doing all right for himself with people putting their card details into the internet. So yeah.
So guys, we're coming to an end. Two questions. You can pick which one. Is there one number from the research that you think is fascinating, but the industry is going to be, ignoring? And also perhaps something that came out of the field work that, you did, you believed before, don't believe in now, either way. Something kind of, that popped out that was surprising for you guys.
Yeah, I can probably start. I can start on the one number. So I would probably say that my number is that 39% of millennials play games on their television set. And I think if you rewind and think about the perception of what a television was, it's changed massively. Like if you go into the home of a millennial or younger audience, they're typically going to have a PlayStation or an Xbox plugged into it, or they're going to have some sort of gaming setup on there. And what that means is that their television is doing much more for them than it maybe used to or has done for older generations. But I wouldn't be surprised if, companies don't move quickly enough to react to the reality that people expect more interactivity on their TV now.
Conrad?
Yeah, building on that actually, but less to do with the activity, actually the hardware and what it's used for, and more the types of content. The amount of younger people who are watching long form YouTube, and this is not a surprise to us, not least because we've been doing lots of work on this for a long time now. But I think it's something that the industry will ignore because we've got caught up in this debate, this sort of semantic, philosophical debate as to whether YouTube is TV or not. And to the average man, woman, person in the living room, it doesn't matter. It's just content that they enjoy. No. And it changes what they expect from TV. And TV is increasingly infusing content creators and how they make content. And the gap between these two things is narrowing. Meanwhile, the industry is navel gazing and twiddling its thumbs over whether it's TV or not. It's just content. It's just moving images. It's entertainment. It's things that people enjoy.
Yeah, I agree with that. Nice. Not that I agree with YouTube is TV, but I agree that the debate is moot, and I've said so for the last 18 months. I think it's a PR campaign and mostly slogan more than anything else. Guys, thank you so much. So. There's a lot more coming your way in September. You got to attend Streaming Made Easy Live again, September 10th in Amsterdam, the day before IBC starts. If you want to get tickets, go to streamingmadeeasylive.com. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Nice to see you.